Century 14 for a shooting at Century Theaters. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium.
Roger, keep your fires west of the smoke. You're cleared hot. An officer hit. Send me the world.
Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again.
Welcome to Tactical Tangents.
Welcome back to Tactical Tangents. This is Mike. This episode is brought to you by Right-On Optics. Right-On is bringing you high-quality glass at a great value. I use and trust their scopes, binoculars, and red dot sights, and you can too with their unconditional lifetime warranty. If you ever have a problem with their gear, they will replace it, not repair it. Finish up your next build and keep a little extra cash on hand for ammo so you can actually go out and shoot that thing. Find your next optic at rightonoptics.com.
And this is Jim. This episode is also brought to you by ManusX. We've talked a lot about the tactical fantasy on this podcast, and one of the quickest ways to break your tactical fantasies and actually improve your performance is by getting real feedback. One of the ways you can do that is with ManusX. You're not going to get better at shooting on your own. You need practice, data, and coaching. And you need to make the most of your ammo with good live and dry fire training. Manus is a family of training devices that tracks you while you train. It times and tracks everything you do in a drill and coaches you as you go. It is indispensable to taking your shooting to the next level. Go find them on manusx.com.
So I want to dig into a term that I heard recently, or I guess I should say I've been hearing more recently, and it's called shared consciousness. And what this taps into is a concept that we've talked about a number of times on the show related to implicit guidance and control, or implicit communication. And those are all kind of buzzy words, which is why I like shared consciousness a little bit better.
But it sounds so foofy.
Yeah. And they all sort of mean the same thing with a little bit of nuance in there. And
we need to meditate together, maybe smoke some weed, and, align our chakras. Is that where you're taking us, Mike?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
But the thing is, this is actually a really important concept. And so it's, we can throw these like quarter and nickel and 50-cent words at people and have like another management bureaucratic buzzword to throw around in meetings and stuff.
No, but I want mandatory training. That's the only way we're going to understand this.
Right.
Yeah.
But this concept is actually really, really important. And the common one that I think we've used on the podcast before is if I'm clearing a building with my SWAT team buddies and I see the helmet of the guy in front of me just kind of veer off in one direction, that tells me a whole lot, right? It tells me which way he's focusing his attention, and I start to look for work elsewhere. And he didn't have to say anything. I didn't have to read anything back. It happens very, very quickly. It's very intuitive, and I can anticipate, the needs of him, and that sets the whole chain of events behind me, right? Where those people are going to go as well. So that kind of communication really smooths out the flow of if I'm trying to get, into a structure for a hostage rescue in a big hurry, or to intervene on an active killer in a big hurry, it speeds up the whole process because we don't have to stop and have a huddle.
And the literal flow, right? If you think through CQB, and I'm not a CQB expert, but you're trying to kind of flow like water, right? And the quicker you're able to communicate and the fewer words you need, or hand signs or shoulder shrugs or whatever that you need to do this, the safer you're going to be, the more effectively and efficiently you're going to get from where you start to your objective, right?
The other place is if let's say we're going to a call. And this doesn't have to be a tactical team or SWAT team specific thing. It could be any law enforcement thing. But you show up at a call, and let's use something real simple, a traffic accident, right? Rollover collision at an intersection or on a freeway somewhere, and 3 or 4 cops are arriving on scene at about the same time, and they're the first ones to arrive. There's some bystanders. There's a car that's flipped over, and you're starting to see smoke and maybe a little bit of flames. And what, your first thought is probably like, oh shit, that thing's catching on fire. Is anybody in it? Right. And probably without a lot of communication or, planning, those guys are all going to converge and see if someone is stuck in there, if they're able to get him out, something like that. Right. And my fire buddies would probably say like, that's stupid. Don't do that. But let's just face it. That's just generally what good guys do, is they want to do something.
You stand there, you get the marshmallows, you let it burn. I understand.
Right. Yeah.
So one of the sayings you're going to hear a lot with this sort of thing is find work, right? So the secret of finding work is exactly what work needs to get done, and the priority of work. So if someone's already pulling the person out, you need to do something else, right? Whatever that something else is, blocking traffic, something like that, and don't wait for someone to tell you, because you already know what right looks like.
Yeah.
And knowing what right looks like ahead of time is one of the secret ingredients to this.
Yeah, and there's a lot of directions we could take this, right? We could talk about resource management. We could talk about dividing up the workload and stuff and sharing the work. But in terms of what we're saying when we say shared consciousness is we get a read on that situation together, right? Like we're making decisions together. And for example, let's say you go to a domestic violence call, and you can hear like a woman inside this house just getting absolutely beaten to shit, right? Like some guy is just beating the crap out of her, and 2 or 3 cops arrive on scene, and they just start kicking the door down, and they go in and they try to save the day or whatever, intervene in that. And let's say something goes poorly and there's an investigation, right? There's an officer involved shooting that occurs. And now we're in the incident review process where they're doing an investigation, and they say something like, who made the decision to go inside? Who made the decision to force entry? Who made the decision to kick the door? And it's like, well, I mean, no one raised their hand and said I'm in charge. This is what we're doing. We kind of were all on the same page. We all made the decision. That was just a consensus, right? There wasn't a discussion about that. We just did it. That is shared consciousness. Going into an active killer scenario, the same sort of thing. Who interpreted this as an active shooter? How did you know it was this? Well, that just fit this template. We just went in and we did the thing, right? So the idea of shared consciousness or implicit guidance and control or implicit communication is kind of building on this. And this is a big deal because, like Jim was kind of alluding to, this is the secret sauce. This is where you build efficiency. This is where you build speed. This is where the mojo is when it comes to teamwork and synergy, right? Where the sum of the effort is greater than the individual parts. So that's a big part of it. As it relates to communication specifically, implicit communication, at its core, this isn't really anything different than when people say things like, your communication is 15% of the words that you say and 85% how you say it. Or your tone of voice says everything, and a lot gets lost in translation, and it's body language and all of that, right?
Yeah, body language and tone, that makes sense, right? A lot of our evolution is to be social and community animals. We use context clues to communicate efficiently and read each other and read the situation and detect danger. Those are important to our survival as critters, right? And you will find, if you haven't already, some people are much better at that than others. An awful lot of military people I've worked with can't goddamn read a room to save their lives. And they're still very good at what they do, flying an airplane or fixing an airplane or,
shooting bad guys,
infantry tactics or whatever. But you need, especially in a tight team, you need enough social skills and self-awareness and emotional awareness and that communication awareness to be able to do this well and quickly.
And think about just your interpersonal relationships. The tone of voice that you lose in a text message, for example, over a Facebook message or something like that. It's really easy to be like, well, what is that supposed to mean? It's like, oh, no, I didn't mean it like that. Like it didn't, so in a shared consciousness sort of way, the idea of us all being on the same page, it's all sort of related. Now, I'm not saying that shared consciousness is something that, you're going out of your way to build with your friends or whatever. I mean, I guess it could be, right? It could be that, for example, parenting. I have a 2-year-old, and my wife and I have more or less worked out our philosophy on things like discipline or things like bedtime routines and things like that. And so the decision making and the hiccups that come with that when 2-year-olds will be 2-year-olds, there's a shared consciousness that comes with us being on the same page and how we're going to manage the meltdown that he's inevitably going to have for whatever reason. So
let me give you a quick example on that. So I have kids who are like 5 and 7, and I have spent their whole lives teaching them exactly what I want them to do, right? So to get to the point where I don't have to, right, that they're making their own good decisions independently is the goal. And this relates back, this is fundamental leadership. So I'm at the point with my kids where I don't tell them what to do next. I say literally the words, now what do you need to do next? And I want to watch them do the next right thing, right? So the bedtime routine. I don't say, brush your teeth at this point. I say, what's the next thing we need to do, right? Because someday I ain't going to be around. One way or the other, I'm probably going to be deployed, if nothing else. and I need them to be able to brush their own damn teeth without me telling them, right? This is implicit guidance and control. This is fundamental implicit guidance and control and leadership, which is not to say I'm this best leader dad, but like that is my method for getting there.
Well, and these are the sort of concepts that help you build that, right? In terms of whether you're managing an effective team or you're just running a household on some level, that's all part of it. To the tone of voice thing, I want you to think about what happens, just to relate this back to how this relates to tactical decision making. An example of this would be a 911 call. How much gets lost in translation when the caller calls a 911 operator who types things into a computer that goes to a dispatcher. The dispatcher reads the words in the computer over the radio in a very clinical, sterile way, and that gets interpreted through my layer of decision making when I go out in the field and I hear that over the radio and I read the words on the computer. We're literally playing the telephone game there, right? So if someone calls 911 and they say, someone broke into my house, imagine how different that call sounds if the person says, hey, I got home from vacation and it appears that someone broke into my house. Or, hey, I just arrived home and I see a flashlight moving around inside. I think someone might be inside my house. Or whispering, like, I think someone just came into my house. Those three things all get managed a little bit differently, right? And so the decision-making process starts with the call taker's interpretation of those things. That gets translated into whatever they do on the computer, right? They prioritize the call, they label it a certain way, they put whatever notes they want in. The dispatcher has to see those things a certain way. And hopefully we all arrive at the same conclusion that, hey, this is a home invasion in progress. We don't want to mess that up, right? We don't want oh no, actually he got home from vacation and it looks like his house was broken into sometime in the last week or two. We don't really know when. We don't want that to be interpreted as a home invasion or vice versa if it's not, right? So the system, the whole like process there, the idea is for us to be on the same page. And how do we get that, right? It's a whole collaborative process.
Yeah. So in this collaborative effort where we're trying to all kind of efficiently communicate and establish, no joke, kind of a telepathy, be able to read each other's minds, right? The joke we have at work is we're trying to get the hive mind going. And like, someone will message, hey, what uniform are we wearing today? And everyone else is like, you should probably already know that. You're part of the hive now. So when that's kludging, when it's working, you can see it and you can feel it. And you get to the point where you don't have to ask the question. And that doesn't relate necessarily back to the 911 operator example, but that's what we're shooting for, right? So that whatever does get communicated is an accurate picture, and everyone has that same accurate picture in their head. That's that shared situational awareness, right?
I could give you another sort of tactical example of this. Let's say we're working a barricaded fugitive. Someone's barricaded inside their home. They're wanted for some felony thing, and we are there to get them out of the house. And we've got hostage negotiators, and the house is surrounded, and the tactical team, we've got armor there, and you've got a guy in a loudspeaker, hey, Dennis, this is the police department. We're not going to go away. We've got a search warrant. We're not leaving. You need to come out, blah, blah, blah. And let's say these communication has gone on for hours with no reaction from the guy. They've been trying to call him. They've been trying to text him, right? And at some point, all of a sudden, boom, the door cracks open. Now, how many people, again, knowing that our tactical team, we're going to try to be as efficient. There's redundancy where we need it, but we don't want every single person to be out and exposed and on the door. So you might have 1 or 2, maybe 3 guys watching the door at one time, and everyone else is positioned behind cover in a safe spot in reserve. So boom, the door cracks open, right? Now you might have 1 guy on gun. Hey man, show me your hands. Keep your hands where I could see them. And there should be a whole flow of things that happen afterwards, right? Hopefully, someone is going to come up behind the person on gun and take over commands for him so that the guy on gun can be the guy on gun, and that's it. Hopefully, someone with less lethal is going to get close and get in a position where if they need to fire on this guy with less lethal before it goes lethal or before he tries to make a run for it and escape or whatever, those pieces should be falling into place. Hopefully the guys like me with the dog that are thinking about, hey, my dog's got to be rested. He's got to be ready. I'm going to get the dog up and alert, ready to go chase the guy if he makes a run for it. The guy that's on the communications for the PA, the public address system or the microphone, might have to stop with the PA announcements so that the guys on the ground with face-to-face contact can talk to him. So all of those things essentially should happen without us having to say, okay, hold on, everybody. Like, let's time out. Let's take a break. Okay, you're going to be on lethal cover. You're going to be on commands. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. Like, everyone should just kind of connect those dots, and it should just jive and flow, like Jim is saying.
Absolutely. And to bring this back to kind of our Boyd construct, our fundamentals, is the longer it takes you to build that shared situational awareness picture, the longer it takes you to make a decision and communicate out that decision and act on it, the more your problems are going to stack up.
The less relevant your observations become.
Yep. And the more opportunities the bad guys have to change the situation out from under you while you're in the middle of it.
Gain initiative.
So while you're trying to talk to the guy and the PA system is blaring over you and the guy pulls a gun, but somebody says gun, but not everyone hears it. And then, the dog is chasing a tennis ball instead of the guy or whatever. You have a stack of problems. And so the better you have good training and good rehearsals and good briefings, that's another place where this happens, where everyone kind of understands what their role is, their task and purpose. In traditional military speak, we would talk about a rock drill, a rehearsal of concept drill, where every person who has a play has to stand up and explain and brief back. This is what I'm going to do. This is my task. This is my purpose. This is where I'm going to stand. This is the direction I'm going to go. And everybody on the team should be at least able to explain what their role is and what they need to be worried about at any given time, right? But that's easier said than done. And you need to have decisions made at the right level, and you need to have people making those decisions. They have to be selected, trained, and exercised, and that's very time consuming. It's very expensive, and sometimes it's dangerous because you have to do real training in a real operational environment, and that scares people. But the cost of getting that wrong is bad outcomes, and that should scare you more.
Yeah, and you also have to give people a little bit of rope to make decisions and have some autonomy. And like Jim is saying, as far as making decisions at the right level, this is something that has come up for us a lot of times. There are certain decisions that, to enter or not to enter the house. There are certain times where, a team leader is going to make that call, make the entry, or breach the door. And that comes from him. That's his executive authority unless he is incapable of making that decision. Now, in some scenarios, there's shots fired inside and there's innocent people in there. I mean, we all are going to be on the same page and we're all going to move, and he's going to be calling it as we go, but we all know that and we can accept that. But in less clear such situations, that call comes from him. But on the other hand, things like using less lethal or sending the dog or, the decision to shoot. The team leader 3 or 4 back in the stack is not going to be the guy in the best position to make that decision. And he expects the people that are on the front line to be able to do that on their own. And so part of that, like Jim is saying, is training and experience and rehearsals and all of that. And some of that can be in the briefing. Hey, these are the things that are authorized. These are the things that we're giving you the autonomy to make the decisions on, your left and right limits. And these are the things that we're going to make the call. But like Jim said, it's easier said than done. So we're going to talk about kind of how we get there. I think we've sold the importance of that.
But real quick, So we've talked a lot about a SWAT scenario, right? We got a stack of guys going into a house. That's one way to look at this, right? Another way to look at this is you're in your home. Something goes bump in the night. You say to your wife, I'll go check it out. Stay here. You go check it out. You sense movement behind you. You turn and level your gun at your wife. Because she didn't hear you, she didn't understand you, she didn't trust you, and she didn't rehearse with you that that's how this is supposed to go, right? You think that's never happened before? So this is where figuring this stuff out before something goes bump in the night is kind of the key, right?
Yeah. And to that point, getting to, again, I think we sold the importance of it so much as now we're trying to build into how do we get there. You can apply this to big picture, little picture, macro, micro levels, right? On the strategic, the grand scale, we've kind of touched on this idea of decentralized command. And we've talked about a lot of those tenets, right? Where those decisions have to be made at the best level possible. And sometimes that's not back at headquarters. Certain things back at headquarters or the command post or whatever, but certain things out on the front lines. So big picture, this is essentially decentralized command. But like I mentioned, even in just interpersonal skills and relationships, this stuff can matter. And where we really focus on, as far as the point of this episode, is building it in teams, in specifically small teams, because in most of our work environments, the people that are going to be orchestrating this have already done a lot of it for us, for better or for worse. And some of us are going to be set up better for it or not. But where the individual listener of this podcast probably has the most influence is within your little circle of people that you work with every single day. And so I want you to think about this in that context, because if you work in a police squad or on a fire company, or like Jim has said, you're just self-defense, home defense, you're planning with your family, I want you to think about working in those small teams and making sure that you're doing the things that you can do to have everyone on the same page when shit gets weird. The active killer scenario. Again, you can apply that whether you're on a fire company or an ambulance crew, whether you're a self-defense concealed carry person out with your family or as law enforcement. Okay, we're all on the same page that this is we're pulling out the active killer, file on this. What's my algorithm? What's my flow? What are my priorities? Getting up on that level. That's what we want to do.
And in a big organization, we're talking about forests and trees, right? In a big organization, there's a natural tendency to try to make a procedure for everything. This is, you build out your decision tree and you try to make a 9,000 step decision tree. That just doesn't work. And it doesn't work for a lot of reasons. First off, no one reads all of the procedures in a big organization. Just is, right? And you can make people take tests on it. It still doesn't work, okay? No one can apply them all, because no matter how detailed you make your procedures, life finds a way to make those procedures not apply. So what then? Right? The tendency is maybe swing it to the other side of the pendulum, and you just do some vague hand wave. Well, my guidance is do the right thing. Just do whatever I would do.
Thanks.
I've had commanders say that, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll just do whatever I think you would do. Great. That doesn't work either, right? So as a leader at whatever level, team leader, platoon leader, company, general, what chief of police, it doesn't matter. You have to communicate your intent, explain what it is you're trying to accomplish, and kind of the way you like to see things accomplished, right? And you have to be clear on the left and right limits and explain to people exactly how much left and right they've got. Hey, if you can't get a hold of me or you don't have time, this is the level of decision I'm comfortable with you making. I need you to stop and call me if you're about to X or Y or Z, right? Wake up criteria is what we call that. And then you have to train and exercise this. Actually have your guys go do the things in a training environment and debrief it. Say, hey, I don't like this decision. I don't like how it went. I want you to make it this way in the future, right? That is a lot of work, but that's what we're asking.
It is. And that's exactly where I'm headed with this is we kind of focus this at that small teams level, just working in your small groups. But if you are someone who works at that upper level of management or leadership in an organization where this applies, or someday when you become that person that is in charge or running an organization, you've got to think about how you can program those people below you, right? Those people lower in rank to make favorable decisions. And that is typical OODA loop, John Boyd stuff, right? Shaping someone's orientation so that their observations would lead to similar actions and outcomes that you would have if you were making those decisions yourself. And you have to think about like how you do that. Part of it is, like Jim is saying, you can make a procedure or a policy or a checklist. And there are certainly examples of things that fits. We've got one for officer-involved shootings. You can't control when shit goes down at the shooting, right? But as that starts to come, the dust starts to settle, the investigators that show up, they go, okay, these are the steps, these are the calls we need to make. These are how we're going to segregate everybody. This is how we're going to organize this whole thing. And there's a whole procedure for that. It works for some situations, but you have to be thoughtful in how you do that, right? How do you design your tactics for searching a building so that when 2 or 3 officers go and they clear a house, they do it in a way that's safe and effective and manageable? How do you manage things like just your use of force policies? And I'm using cop examples because that's just what I know. But you could apply this to medical stuff. You could apply this to the fire service. It all to military stuff. That's what I have Jim here for. So I don't have to speak to that. I'll let him do it. But
to what you want your babysitter to do. If your kid is turning blue, well, you are on date night.
So we had a new babysitter that we used recently, and this was a conversation. We did a little drill before we left the house. Do you call me or do you call 911? Oh, the baby's doing this. Do you call me or 911? Well, I would call 911. Why? What would change your mind? Okay. This happens. Do you call me or him? Let's say he falls and he falls on his bike and he's crying and his arm is obviously broken. Do you call me or do you call 911? Let's say he falls on his bike and he's unconscious. Do you call me or, and you kind of go through scenarios like that. And that's a great example. So
I had a thing posted up with my first set of babysitter and first kid of, kid is crying and will not stop crying. These are the things I would do. And this is the point at which I would give up. So, having something like that, right?
Yeah. Now, going back to that more smaller scale, working with my coworkers, working with my peers in whatever environment that is, the longer you work with someone, you know how they're going to handle something, right? If I have an idea for the podcast and I run it by Jim, there are certain things that if I'm like, hey, Jim, what do you think about this X, Y, and Z tool, this productivity app that I'm looking at or something like that or whatever, right? Like Jim is going to, I could, before I ask that question, let me just think about the possible outcomes that Jim is going to, and which things should I involve Jim with and which things should I handle on my own? Working with each other for a long time helps you figure that out, right?
Yeah. So for anyone not tracking, Jim is about 1,000 years old and hates technology and does not understand all of these newfangled apps. And every 3 days, my buddy Mike finds a new app that he wants us to try to help improve our productivity on this show. So he knows exactly how I'm going to react. And like, start picking my nose while he's telling me about this stuff. And similarly, like I know how Mike handles things, right? And this is fundamental OODA loop. I understand Mike's way of seeing the world. I understand his orientation fundamentally. I've known him since we were kids, right? And I have a pretty good feel for how he's going to interpret any number of things he sees. If someone walks up to us at a gas station when we're on a road trip, I know exactly kind of how Mike's going to roll with that. If we're in a restaurant and someone walks in with a gun out, I have a pretty good idea of what Mike's going to do and where I need to be in relation to him so as not to get filled full of lead.
Jim's going to plug his ears.
I'm going to start peeing myself and cry like a girl. That's what I do.
He just knows it's about to get real loud.
Yeah, I've got my SWAT team guy here, right? But one thing about that, as it relates to tactics and individual tactics, one of my favorite lines from a tactics manual ever was the phrase, and this is flying tactics. It said, "Your tactics should appear random to the enemy, not to the rest of your formation or the rest of your crew." And I love that, right? There are times to go off script. There are times to be unpredictable. And sometimes even unbriefed, like, hey, it went sideways, so I went sideways with it. I can work with that. But being random for the sake of being random and not telling the team what you're going to do is fucking dangerous.
Yeah.
Right?
This is Mike, and I just want to jump in real quick to announce our new partnership with Brink Drones. Brink has created life-saving capabilities in a drone that can break windows, fly into houses and confined spaces, and even crash into things and stay in the air with advanced pilot assistance that does not use GPS. Brink drones are built in the USA. It has night vision and IR that can function in blacked out and zero light conditions. It can flip itself back over, and it is a flying cell phone with two-way communication and a live video feed. It can even carry and drop off items for hostage negotiators with the payload feature. Brink has a really cool and compelling heritage that came to be after the 1 October mass shooting at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, and they are committed in their mission to leverage technology to save lives. And I can tell you firsthand that their drones will do just that by flying into places that are too dangerous to risk human lives. If you work in public safety, your agency needs to see what this drone can do. Go check out Brink Drones at brinkdrones.com, or feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to tell you all about them. Again, that's Brink, BRINC, drones.com. And so this is where the rubber meets the road on this, because this is the mojo, right? This is the glue that makes us work effectively in teams. And it's even things like, how do you communicate certain things? What do they do when they get stressed out? How do you know when they're being emotional? How do they handle conflict? Like, am I better to call this person out in like a talking shit, being funny, joking, like, you know what I mean? That sometimes that is an effective way of addressing things for some people, is you just give them a hard time and you could joke it off, be like, yeah, and then you had fucking Jim over here, you know, doing X, Y, and Z, and it's just funny. And then you're like, yeah, I fucked that up. You know what I mean? Like, that might work in some scenarios. And then there's other times where some
people will not take the hint, and you need to be like, hey, asshole.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's other times, like before the debrief, you go, hey, dude, like, what happened back there? Like, you need to bring that shit up or I will. Right. Like, and so just understanding how your team operates, that's a big deal, especially when it comes to things like, now you're at the point of crisis. And this is where the shared consciousness thing really comes into gear, is like, there's a hierarchy. Teams and the organizations that we're talking about, police, military, fire, like anything related to those things, there's a hierarchy. And when it comes time to make decisions and make a call, you want an idea of how people are going to respond to those things when they get weird. And again, like, that doesn't happen, you know, it doesn't happen overnight. You have to get there. It's a long road. So what does that road look like? This is actually an interesting way that we've been able to come up with a talk about group dynamics. And group dynamics is one of those areas that I've wanted to do like its own episode. Maybe we've done an episode on this. I don't know.
We've definitely danced around it. We've talked about it.
Yeah. But it's something that, like, is anyone going to click on that? Like, is anyone going to click on, who wants to learn about group dynamics? And what it is if you think about organizational behavior and how people interact with other people from like a psychological level, they go through a natural flow. And when I say that it doesn't happen overnight or in a vacuum, this is what we're talking about, is these group dynamics. This is actually a concept in psychology that's been studied. There's a guy named Bruce Tuckman, and he came up with, or I guess more observed and codified, defined the stages of group development, where you look at any group of people or a type of team and you watch them go through this natural sort of arc. And that arc, essentially, the fundamentals are forming, storming, norming, performing. And there's also an adjourning in there that we'll talk about at the end. But I want you to think back to the last time you went to a class for for work maybe, or a training thing for work. And it was with other people. It was with people from other agencies or other departments or other businesses. You had to travel for it.
Team building exercise.
Yeah, that's actually coming up. I have
trust falls. Woo.
Yeah, well, it's funny. So I will use the example of like an EMT refresher class. That will be my example. Every couple of years, I have to go renew my EMT certification, and I go through a class with a bunch of people that are not expecting sometimes to see a cop in there. Actually, that's not true, because lately I've been doing it through an agency that's mostly cops. But at various times in my career, I've gone to like a community college where it's EMTs from the fire department and it's EMTs from an ambulance company, and you might have a couple military types show up, and then you've got like Mike the cop, and like, why is he at EMT school? Because he's a SWAT medic, and everyone's kind of confused by that, right? And you get in this room with a bunch of people, no one knows each other. That group is forming, right? That's a group that is forming. And throughout that first couple hours, a first break, people start kind of joking, and you kind of figure out like, who's the loud one? Who's the one that asks all the stupid questions? Who's the one that's really annoying? Who's the guy that like seems like he has his shit together? Who's the teacher's pet? They're storming, right? There's like this, you can feel people measuring their dick against each other's and figuring out what the hierarchy is, right? And then as that starts to kind of stabilize a little bit, the status of everybody has been determined, right? You know who you want your partner to be when you go run scenarios. You know who you want to go hang out with at lunch, for example, because you're going to be hanging out for the next couple of days. You know who you want to kind of avoid. You know that if you're struggling with something, like who's the person you're going to go ask for help. Like if you don't understand something, you have a question, like who has this shit squared away, and you're going to go ask them. That's the kind of norming thing. And towards the end of the course, when you start running scenarios and you kind of learned everybody, when you get put with a certain partner in a scenario, for example, who's going to take the lead role and who's going to take the assisting role. And it kind of just gels. That's the performing phase of it, right? And eventually there's the adjourning part, which, everyone's going to go their separate ways and the group is going to be over with. Now that's
sign each other's yearbooks and, say have a bitch in summer and, we're BFF forever. And then,
everyone's going to exchange numbers and swear they're going to keep in touch and grab a beer sometime, and they never will.
but you're setting the stage for a future forming stage with them, right? That's what you're doing in an adjourning stage.
Yeah. But that's a small example of these stages of group development: forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning. And teams everywhere will do this, right? Whether it's your squad, your engine company, we do a shift bid every year, and patrol cops throughout the entire city get a new squad, and they have to kind of learn new people and new things, right? And if you watch for this, you'll see people go through those stages.
Yeah. So these stages are real. You ignore them at your peril. You can influence them a little bit, but controlling them is tough, right? And you don't get to just declare, okay, well, we're in the forming stage now.
Yeah, I know.
Like, it doesn't really work that way.
It's a natural arc.
And every time there's a disturbance, as in like a change in the group, you see it kind of it cycles again. So the group gets a new leader. All of a sudden, they have to go through this again thing, right? And there are things that you can do to kind of get it going a little bit and push toward the next phase, but you can't really artificially control this. And trying to is usually pretty futile.
Yeah, this is not. It's a natural arc, right? And so when Tuckman defined these stages, it wasn't like, so then, really what you want to do is force it into the next stage. It was more just, hey, like what we're noticing is these are how people tend to go. And it's not a script. It's just a flow. It's a It's development, right?
It's a tendency, really, right? When people first meet each other, they're usually pretty polite. They're usually pretty reserved. They're usually trying to read each other, right? And then at some point, they're trying to establish themselves in the hierarchy. And then you're going to get little conflicts and you're going to get little dick measuring contests, right?
Jim talked about the team building exercises and trust falls and stuff. And I actually, I always hate when you go to a class or a course or something and you have some instructor that really tries to force some of that on you because it seems disingenuous and it feels forced, right? It's just like, okay, like I'm not playing your stupid games, guy. But there was one time where I went to this course. It was a rope rescue course kind of thing. And they did some of these little team building exercises that it was the sort of thing where you had to like improvise, you got like a couple pieces of wood, like a 2x4 and a, piece of rope that's not long enough. And you had to figure out how to get like the floor is lava or some shit. And it was actually facilitated in like a funny way that actually worked. And really what it came down to was the way that it was sort of debriefed. And the way that it was debriefed was they actually talked about this in the context of what we were going to be doing, which is, hey, and I'll use trust falls. We didn't do trust falls, but there is a chemical reaction that happens when you have physical contact with other people. You release oxytocin into your bloodstream, and that is like the trust hormone, right? And it's stuff like, that's why they encourage skin-to-skin contact with babies when they're first born, is because it releases that oxytocin and builds trust and bonds and stuff like that. And in the context of doing high risk, if you're going to be dangling from a rope up high and I need to grab you and prevent you from falling, like we need to break that contact barrier. I can't be afraid of touching you, right?
Yeah, just start spooning right away in the forming stage and you'll just get through these stages real quick.
You're doing it wrong, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of building trust with each other, I'm going to be checking your harness and checking your knots and making sure that you don't fall. Getting through like the little, hey, I need to help you across this wooden plank thing, like reach out and grab my hand. It seems stupid, but it actually does play into that. And especially when you put something on a time limit and it's problem solving, like Jim said, you're going to have a little bit of conflict and hierarchy become established, but it's in a low stakes, low pressure kind of way, right? Where no one's going to actually get hurt. So the way it was presented was actually pretty good. It's something to think about.
One of the really neat things about boot camp and boot camp experiences, some police academies are like this, some less so, some more so, is that you can actually see this. You can walk into the room and look around the room and see, based on what week they are in training, kind of where they are in the progression, right? So you go in week 1 and there's a certain vibe to it, right? And the way they talk to each other, the way they talk to you. And then you go in the final week and you can see it again. You see that snapshot of where it's a totally different vibe. They move together in a certain way. They literally touch each other and lean on each other. They call each other nicknames. Like that's one of the things about the Top Gun sequel recently came out, and Cougar and Merlin and Ballsack and whatever their LARPer names are in the fighter community.
By the way, if you have not seen it yet, by the time you'll have some time before this episode comes out, but the movie was awesome. I don't care what Jim says about the aviation stuff.
But there's a reason fighter guys call each other by their slave names, right? And there's a reason why SWAT teams and Army organizations around the world do the nickname thing. That's part of the norming that you see in a group, right? And there are ways you can build teams and ways to evaluate them. But fundamentally, if guys on the group don't have the level of comfort where they can literally, or at least figuratively, cuss each other out and debrief, you're not at the right level of like connection. And that, I think, is kind of the key message from me on the Tuckman stages. You've got to get to the point of comfort with each other where you've got your little dick measuring contest sorted out to the point you can say, hey, we screwed this up. You screwed this up. This is what has to change next time. Or I screwed this up. And you can be honest enough with the group to admit when you screwed something up. And that requires a certain level of, group dynamic to get to that stage where you can really do that.
The thing that I want to highlight in this is when we say performing, what that really looks like, because to Jim's point, it's not just about like achieving or accomplishing some task. Like, okay, you could do whatever, like battle drill, or you can clear a house, or you can run a call or fight a fire. And yeah, I guess it's the softer stuff. Like Jim is saying, it's the stuff where if something was to get weird and go off script, how would they cope with that? And how would they recover from it? Right? That's like when we talk about performing, and if you're looking for high performing teams, Jim mentioned the guy comes into a restaurant with a gun scenario, right? We know each other well enough that he can read and play off of me without any words being exchanged. And so in terms of shared consciousness, going back to kind of to circle this into the whole overarching theme of this episode, that implicit communication stuff is like, what do we communicate without any words being spoken? That's the difference between what a normal functioning team is and what a high performing team is.
I'll give you another example. In a relationship, speaking of touchy-feely, people who have not kissed each other before trying to go in for the kiss, right? And they're trying to read each other and, which way do I tilt my head? Which way do you tilt your head? Otherwise we bonk fucking noses or whatever. You got to get to the point where I'm going to go to the right, she or he or whatever is going to go to the left, and I'm going to go forward 80% and she's going to go forward 20%. Whatever that is for you, you've got to get to the point where you can do that. While someone is shooting at you in a tactical scenario, you got to be able to get that level of movement. Yeah. Am I jumping around a little bit? Yes. Did it get a little weird? Yes. But that's
but I'm
where
going to build on it
you.
because wife and I have been doing some dance lessons actually, and this is perfect because in dancing there is a lead and a follow. Turns out, and there have been enough times at this point where, because if you are trying to learn a specific dance, in our case, let's say the foxtrot. And there's probably people listening to the show who, like me, prior to a couple weeks ago, would have been like, "What the fuck is a foxtrot?" That's okay.
That's between between Delta and golf.
and if just saying, take your marriage to the next level, get some dance lessons. Jim can vouch.
Checks.
So it's one thing to have the steps of a dance memorized. Like, okay, here we are. We can perform the dance. Like, we can make these steps happen in the right sequence and order. It's another thing if I am trying to maneuver us to a certain position and she just needs to play off of my lead. And if she starts anticipating where we're going to go instead of just following my lead, we literally start like stepping on each other and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So there's implicit communication that happens. I've got to prep her for things and all that. But yeah, it is foofy, but there's actually a lot to unpack in shit like that. So,
oh yeah. So what this ultimately is teamwork, right? We're talking about teamwork. The problem with teamwork is that word is so abused that it loses meaning, right?
Come on, guys, we can do it. Rah, rah, rah.
Yeah, you hear the rah-rah cheerleading stuff and there is no I in team. Oh, okay, great, wonderful. There is a eat me, I'm pretty sure. But teamwork, this is the cool part of teamwork, right? When you get that synergy, when you're doing more than the sum of your parts, when you guys can just read each other and kludge real well, right? So it needs to be more than the norms of, well, everyone wears pink on Friday because we're the Alpha Team Rangers or whatever the hell your unit identity is. But there are actual tasks, actual things that good teams tend to do, right? And where I see this a lot on the flying side is there's a crew resource management model that I really like called DAM class. I stole it from the Navy, speaking of Maverick and Goose and stuff. And they identified on a highly functioning crew, air crew on an airplane, that every member of the team is contributing in some useful way to these steps. They're not really steps, these tasks, right? They're contributing to the decision making. So when there's a decision to be made, people speak up. Hey, this is what I think we should do. Here's why. Cool. Assertiveness. Everyone on the team has to be able to speak up when it is their time to speak up, and make their point, no matter where they are in the hierarchy. Mission analysis. Everyone on the team needs to understand what the hell it is we're trying to accomplish, that commander's intent thing. What really is our task right now, right? Communication. They have to be able to talk to each other, and that's both verbal, nonverbal, body language, radio calls. Sometimes it's tactical chat messaging back and forth. Sometimes it's iPhone messaging back and forth. Leadership, knowing who is in charge and at what time, right? Sometimes it's the aircraft commander who's in charge. Sometimes it's the navigator. Sometimes it's the, during any given phase of a flight, it's a different person sometimes on the plane who's in charge. Ultimately, the aircraft commander or the pilot in command is in command, but that doesn't mean they're in charge right that second. Same is true like in an operating room, right? Ultimately, there's the surgeon who's in charge, but when they're busy putting someone down for anesthesia, it's the anesthesiologist who's in charge. And sometimes it's the head nurse who's in charge, right? Depending on what task is happening right then. Adaptability, recognizing when the situation has changed or the mission has changed and everyone being able to kind of shift together to the new task. And situational awareness, that shared sense of what is happening both internally and externally, right? So DAM class, decision-making, assertiveness, mission analysis, communication, leadership, adaptability, situational awareness. There's going to be a test on this at the end. Get ready for it, okay? So about that happens both internally on your team and externally. How does your team help everyone around it figure out, what the next right decision looks like? Does your team understand who's really in charge, both internally and externally, that sort of thing? So, in my opinion, a high-functioning team, a team that has really gotten to this level, is doing those things well, and is doing those things well without having to talk a whole lot about it.
Yes.
No one has to say, I'm in charge right now. If you're having to say, I'm in charge right now, you ain't in charge, right?
Yeah, that's the key, is that it has to be implicit, right? And that's where shared consciousness, it should be something that we are on the same page about. And I think that's a big part of this. So again, lots of buzzwords, I know, but fundamentally what this episode really boils down to is kind of defining teamwork and helping us figure out how we can work through those stages of group development and get to the next level, especially in the terms of informal or unofficial leadership, right? Because although we might have great leaders in our organization, and maybe not, right? The guys that we work with day in and day out are the people around us. And so we kind of can recognize this at that level, at that tactical, quote unquote, level or operational level. And so I think that's something that anyone can learn from and apply it. And maybe someday when you promote and you're in charge, you'll be able to help build that in your guys down the road. A couple places you can read up a little bit more about this idea or some of these concepts. Obviously, Boyd. We've talked a lot about Boyd in the past. We've done episodes on OODA Loop. The main book that you can learn a lot about him is Boyd, the Fighter Pilot Who Changed the Art of War by Robert Karam. That was the biography written about him. That's probably the best primer. And there's lots of his work that, if you go down the rabbit hole, you can enjoy that. Another book is called The Starfish and the Spider. And it is essentially a Boydian style approach to decentralized command, but in the business world. And so they talk about things like how file sharing, when people started sharing music in a digital format, and they started like being able to send that to their friends, and it wasn't just tangible CDs and records that people had to buy. Like once that cat was out of the bag, there was no going back. There was no fixing it. And so like you can cut the head off the spider, but if you just read the book, you'll have to.
Yeah, I really struggle with the analogy too. But at the end of the day, decentralizing has a lot of advantages, but there's a certain time and a place to do that decentralization. And that book kind of starts explaining that well.
in a relatable way because it uses a business approach. There's shit that you've heard of in that book. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So big picture, just a couple things to kind of keep in mind as we go. Implicit guidance and control is one thing to say. It's another thing to actually do, right? You have a burden as a leader to make sure your guys know what you're trying to accomplish, what decisions they're allowed to make, and what their left and right limits are. And if they can't, if they don't know how to please you, or if they don't know how to do their job, like that's a problem, right? So that's a first step. As far as building a team that works, it's going to go through that arc, right? The forming, storming, norming stuff. And you can tell walking into a room kind of where they are. If everyone's sitting there, they never get out of their dick measuring contest, you know you got a problem, right? And maybe you do need to go have a training event where you're doing trust falls and ropes courses and stuff. Like there's a reason those programs exist. Sometimes adding some challenges to a group can help it form and gel a little better. And then the things that individuals on the team have to do well are that damn class thing. And I understand it sounds rote, but if you really stop and think about like what good teams do well, they do stuff like that well. The decision making. Every member of the team is assertive enough to hold their ground until they're convinced that they're wrong, right? Assertiveness. Mission analysis. Everyone knows what the hell we're trying to accomplish. And I've seen this go wrong. I've seen it go wrong in combat where people get fixated on like not the big mission, not the big task. And they chase themselves down a rabbit hole, right? And situational awareness. If you don't know what's going on, you got a problem. And on a good team, you can look at the guy next to you and tell whether he knows what's going on, or you can hear it in the radio. Ooh, that guy is full tumbleweed. He does not know what's going on. We need to fix him right now, right?
Full tumbleweed. I'm stealing that.
Yep. So that's I think all I got on this. Like this is the important stuff. This is the magic. This is the secret ingredients to the teamwork sauce. And this is how you get from the, oh boy, we're the D team demons or whatever. Like it's how you get past that, past the cheerleading phase and into actually performing in a useful way, in a way that will help you make better decisions faster. And that's the whole point.
Yep. All right, guys, that's all we got for tonight. This episode is brought to you by Drip Drop. Drip Drop Oral Rehydration Solution is an electrolyte powder that you mix with water. It was formulated by a doctor for quick absorption. I work in the desert, and it only takes a few hours in the heat, wearing body armor, carrying around a bunch of gear before I start feeling like crap and fall behind the curve in dehydration. Drip Drop keeps you in the fight so you can finish the mission and rehab for the next one. Go get you some at dripdrop.com or on Amazon, or ask your supply guy to find it for you.
This episode is also brought to you by Dry Fire Mag. Ammo is hard to find these days, and you need to stay proficient by working your dry fire training. Dry Fire Mag solves the common and annoying problem in dry fire of constantly having to rack your slide to reset the trigger. With Dry Fire Mag, all you do is clear your weapon, load this training mag up, and work on your trigger work. Check them out on dryfiremag.com.
Don't forget that we put out new episodes on the 1st and the 15th of every month. If you like what we're doing, you can head over to Patreon, give us $1 for each new episode. That money's going to go back into bringing you good content. If you want to interact with us, you could find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are at TacTangents. You can also email info@tacticaltangents.com. And one last thing, our Facebook discussion group. We've got a little group going on Facebook. If you go to the groups tab on our page, you can join it. We've got more followers on our page than we have in the group. So I know there's some of you out there following the Facebook page that are on Facebook that are not in the group. Lots of like-minded people in there. So come hang out with us. All right. That's all we got. Good talk.